Hi, welcome to your instructions for page 28 and 29 of your second semester math notebook. Our goal today is I can solve equations with fractions. Now, you are able to solve equations with fractions using the 5 steps that we've been using that you have on page 23, and it would be perfectly okay. However, most of us hate working with fractions and trying to remember, when do we need a common denominator? When do we not? When should we simplify? When do we not? And they're just kind of hard to deal with. So when we think about equations that are already difficult, I want to make it as easy as possible. So I want to show you how to bust the fractions up so you don't have to deal with the fractions in your equation. So here's an example. It says, in this process, the fractions are eliminated first so that you are left with a simpler equation to solve, one that does not have any fractions. Basically, this step would happen after the distributive property. So you do have to do step 1 first. Do the distributive property, get rid of the parentheses, and then you could bust out your fractions. So here's how this works. So you're going to look at all of the denominators in the equation, and you're going to find the least common denominator. And then you're going to multiply both sides of the equation by that least common denominator. So if you remember, in order to keep your equation balanced, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. And so it doesn't matter what you do to both sides, as long as you do the same thing. So you can multiply both sides by 532 if you want. That would just make your equation a lot harder to solve. And so you can multiply both sides by the least common denominator and knock out any fractions. Here's how this works. So if this is our problem, x over 2 plus 3 over 5 equals 3, thinking about what you would normally do, you would subtract 3/5 from both sides, try to figure out what that is, and then you'd have to multiply by 2. And it would be crazy because it's with fractions. It can be done, and if you are great with fractions and you want to practice the old way, that's totally okay. But for those of you who are like me and would rather deal with whole numbers and integers and not have to work with fractions as much, listen in. So the least common multiple is the smallest number that both 2 and 5 will divide into evenly. So the way I always remember least common multiple and least common denominator is I'm going to count by 2s and I'm going to count by 5s. And the first one that they both have in common, that's the least common multiple. So if I think 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, and then I count by 5s, 5, 10, 15, 20. Oh, hey, I said 10 for both of those. So the least common multiple, or if you will, the least common denominator, would be 10. So what you can do is you can multiply both sides of your equation by 10. So it kind of looks like you're going to do the distributive property. So if you multiply the left by 10, then you have 10 times x, which is 10x, and then you would divide by 2, and you get 5x. 10 times 3 is 30, divide by 5, and you get 6. Well, if you're going to multiply the left by 10, you got to multiply the right by 10. 10 times 3 is 30. Now, doesn't 5x plus 6 equal 30 seem a lot easier to solve than x over 2 plus 3/5 equals 3? It's the exact same equation because you just changed it around. You manipulated the equation to make it easier to solve by busting out the fractions. So from there, you would continue to solve like normal. This is only a 2-step equation. There is not variables on both sides. So since the variable's on the left, you just need to move your constants to the right. So since it says plus 6, you'll subtract 6 from both sides, get 5x equals 24. And from there, 5 times x, so the opposite of times is divide. So you divide both sides by 5, and you get 24 over 5. And I am perfectly okay with you leaving it as an improper fraction. If you wanted to change it, you could. There's the answer. So now I'm going to try some problems, and then I'm going to have you try them. Oops, let me get back down here. Okay, so when I look at this equation right here, my denominators, this one doesn't have one, so the denominator would be a 1. This one is a 5, and this one is a 3. So when I count by 5s, 5, 10, 15. Oh, hey, 15 is divisible by 3. So that is going to be my least common denominator to multiply both sides by. So 15 times x plus 2/5 equals negative, oh, and then you've got to multiply both sides by 15. So 15 times negative 1/3. Okay, from there, you can do the distributive property. So 15 times x is 15x. And then here, if you do 15 times 2, that's 30. Divide by 5, that's 6. On this side, 15 times 1 is 15. Divide by 3 is 5. And since one of them is negative, the answer is negative. So 15 times the negative 1/3 would be a negative 5. Doesn't this equation already look easier to solve? From here, continue on with your steps. You have all your variables on the left already, so you will subtract 6 from both sides of your equation. That leaves you with 15x equals negative 11. Now this says 15 times x, so the opposite of times is to divide, so we're going to divide both of these. Control U if you want to do the shortcut, or you can use the underline button up there. So we're dividing both of these by 15. 15 is the one that has the x, so that's what we have to divide both sides by. And we don't need the bottom number underlined, so Control U to get rid of that. And then you're left with x equals negative 11 over 15. That's it. You don't have to find the decimal answer. If it would simplify, if it were negative 10 over 15, I'd want you to go ahead and simplify, but you can leave it improper and you can not make it a decimal, leave it as a fraction. And that's how you do this. So before you go to the next video, I want you to try number 1.